Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is 8-bit Armies? Well, this is an RTS in the classic Command & Conquer style by Petroglyph, who do have some of the old devs from Command & Conquer. Now, when I say Command & Conquer style, I mean this is basically Command & Conquer for all intents and purposes. We're talking about effectively identical building mechanics. We're talking about very similar unit sets in some respects. We're talking about a game that looks ish like that, but more of a voxel interpretation. I would not agree that it is 8-bit. 8-bit games do not look like that. They've never looked like that. This is more like a game that was built out of voxels. It's more like if Minecraft's aesthetic to some degree, or more accurately, I think Crossy Road's aesthetic was crossed with real-time strategy. But it is a fully playable, real-time strategy that reminds me very much of Command & Conquer, and as we dive in, we'll see exactly why that is. We'll also talk a little bit about how much content this game actually has, and what I view as perhaps a misstep in terms of its launch strategy. So if we check out the options here, this looks a little unfinished. Like, it's not really a big problem, but look at the clash between the aesthetic of these little arrows here, and you might think this is the most minor, stupid, petty nonsense you could come up with, but no, look at the background right here, and look at that Crossy Road style of, hey, look at these big blocks, almost a sort of patchwork quilt of graphical nonsense going on in the background. But compare that to this font right here that looks like it was taken from Microsoft Clippy, and you're just like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why don't we use this font? You know, this font sort of fits in with the aesthetic, and this font does not. So this kind of feels a little bit unfinished. I know, that's such a huge minor gripe. Is there such thing as a huge minor gripe? Well, I've just made one up. There you go. There's your first ever, world first, huge minor gripe. But it accentuates the issue that I have with this game in the sense that I don't think this game is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that it's launched way, way, way too early. Anyway, let's have a look at these options. So you've got very basic RTS options here, such as health bar display mode, show hints, show unit silhouettes behind objects, constrain cursor to screen. These are all good things to have. You can also change the way that the fog of war looks, scroll speed, and pop-up delays here. These are all useful. I think if you're looking to ape an RTS when it comes to options and UI changes, you should definitely look at StarCraft 2 as the model for that, since it's probably the best in class, but a decent number nonetheless. There's your options here, you know, very, very basic. Nothing really to write home about. This is not a game that looks incredible. It's not a game that uses extreme high-tech or anything like that. In fact, it's the exact opposite of that, and purposefully so, but you do have a decent number of sliders here nonetheless. You have your full set of resolution options with frame rate options, refresh rate specifically, anti-aliasing available, VSync on or off, and all that good stuff. So we can apply that and everything's good and everything's smooth. Audio sliders, separate audio sliders for everything. Like it, good, liking that. And you can redefine the hotkeys and key bindings as you should be able to do in any RTS. And you might be a bit overwhelmed by the number of keyboard shortcuts, but honestly, like, you don't need to use all of these. You know, this is just going to speed things up for you a little bit. Now, I'm going to show you some skirmish. Before that, however, give you a little look at how the campaign looks. This campaign basically has no story at all, which is why I haven't played much of it. I mostly focused on multiplayer and skirmish. But what you'll see here is that there's a tiny little bit of story. There are no cutscenes. There's no cool FMV like there was in Command & Conquer or anything like that. You know, the faction basically has no personality in and of itself, and the enemy faction is identical to you, but a different color anyway. So the only thing that the campaign, in my eyes, has going for it are these bonus objectives. This is pretty cool because it adds replayability to the game itself, and it also gives you starting loadout for these missions. So it means you get extra stuff when you start the next mission. You can earn this. You know, I can add an extra refinery, extra cash to my opening loadout, which is going to speed things up. So I like the level of replayability there, and it's got a good number of missions. It's got about 20 missions. This could also be played in co-op as well. And some of these gold star level bonuses are quite tough, so it'll give you a reason to play these multiple times. So there's a decent amount of replayability here. So I think that's well fleshed out there, but of course it's lacking any element of cool cheeseball story, the kind of thing that I expect from Command & Conquer. And I think that definitely damages the personality of this game. I mean, I don't think the game really has a huge amount of personality outside of its aesthetic anyway, and I'm going to explain exactly why as we dive into skirmish mode. So we're going to play on Rivertown here. We'll do a nice little 1 versus 1. You can go up to 8 players simultaneously. You've got drop crates enable super weapons, so the crates, you might remember those out of old games like Red Alert, will either have a bonus or they'll explode and kill you. You also have Annihilation, Destroy HQ, and just blow up everything except for turrets, so you don't have to kill everything on the map with this particular game mode. Alright, let's dive on in. Now you might notice there was no faction select here. Now, this is one of the biggest beefs that I have with this game, because they already, in the menu there, showed this fantasy faction that they're probably going to be adding to the game. And they described prior to launch that they are looking to add more factions, and that's going to be the way that the game works. They're going to add new factions to the game as they go along, and eventually I think that we're talking about 6, potentially. Here's the problem. Game launched with 1. Just 1. Not even 2. Just a single faction. So everything that you play in this game is going to be exactly the same as a direct result of that. I think this is a massive misstep. And the reason I believe that is, 1, the game's not in early access, so you don't get that relaunch potential that you find in an early access title, where you get to launch once in early access, and then you get your full release, which maybe gets you another bump on the Steam front page, makes people more aware of your game. It's a fairly successful business model for games that are well developed, no real doubt about that. The thing is, this game is not early access, and it launched with a single faction. I think that's going to heavily damage its potential player base until new factions come out, which makes me just think to myself, why on earth didn't you wait? Like, maybe just wait for one other faction, at least. You know, especially if you're looking to inspire the kind of fan base that Command & Conquer had. I mean, I can't imagine the Petroglyph were delusional enough to... Delusional enough to believe that their game is going to get as much attention and acclaim as Command & Conquer did. No, that's fine, you know, and it's unreasonable to think that. But they have made a game that plays and feels almost identical to Command & Conquer. You see the construction system over to the side right here. You've got the permanent hotbar, and above that, of course, the mini-map. You build one building at a time. If you build multiple production buildings, then you get a speed building multiplier on them, which again is exactly like Command & Conquer. This is very, very familiar. If you played a Command & Conquer game, you can instantly dive into this, which is an advantage, and it evokes memories of a really cool experience in Command & Conquer, but simultaneously, Command & Conquer had more than one faction. In fact, no, it generally had 2, some of the games had 3, and of course there are expansion packs available as well for those particular titles. That expanded the replayability, that expanded the strategic depth, that made the multiplayer more popular and more distinct. Without that, this game is highly limited. Now, I think the game could get away with it if it had an interesting selection of things you could build. Different units, things that were interesting. The problem is every single unit on this basic faction here is as generic as you could possibly imagine. We are talking about infantry, rocket infantry, engineer, armored car, tank, artillery, MG helicopter, rocket helicopter, air transport, and nuclear missile. Those are all of the units in the game. Now, do you remember Command & Conquer? I'm sure you do. If you don't, let me refresh your memory. Command & Conquer had some incredible units, some really awesome, cool, and interesting designs, including the Mammoth tank, for instance, which was amazing. You know? Scorpion tanks from some of the Command & Conquer games. I remember those. The Hand of Nod, for instance. The Obelisk of Light. Stealth tanks. Flamethrower units. And, of course, the heroes like Colonel Burton and Tanya and all that kind of stuff. You know, those things were, in my eyes, really, really awesome. And they very much defined Command & Conquer. They gave it its own unique personality. At a time, by the way, when RTS were becoming a big deal, and as a result, a lot of people were making them and trying to get the edge on other companies. The problem is, this game doesn't have that. Now, you might be able to argue, look, well, you don't need it anymore, because there are barely any RTS games anymore. I mean, yes and no. We still have Grey Goo, we still have Active Aggression, we still have Company of Heroes 2, we potentially have a new Dawn of War coming on our hands at some point in the not-too-distant future, if that teaser trailer is to be believed. Yes, okay, and of course StarCraft is just sitting around saying, hey, I'm still here and I've still got millions of players. So yeah, okay, you don't have as many RTS as you used to, but you gotta put some kind of personality in beyond your aesthetic. And that's what the game has going for it right now, and an excellent soundtrack by Frank Lepaki, which is very much 8-bit inspired, which I love. You know, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. I'm really happy that Frank is brought on board once again, because as you're probably aware, you know, I like his work a great deal. I've been very, very honest and open about that. I mean, hell, I took the guy to dinner in Vegas, for God's sake, because Hell March was such a big deal, you know, in my life. You know, it was one of my favorite pieces of video game music of all time, so I love the guy to death. So what you have here, though, outside of that, is a game that is the most generic RTS that I can imagine. That doesn't mean it's a bad RTS. It's responsive. It controls well. The units are clearly distinct from the background, so you can see what's going on. Pretty much has the options that I expect a real-time strategy to have. The campaign, while lacking story, does have replayability in that neat little loadout system, which is something a little bit new, which allows you to accelerate the otherwise sometimes boring process of starting a real-time strategy game. And it's very accessible, there's no doubt about that. You know, it is going to be very, very easy for people to get into initially, and that may help to initially boost the player base. The problem is, if you start your game with just one faction, especially one that has almost nothing to distinguish it from any other RTS game, then I have to ask, you know, how well do you expect it to do long term? How do you expect the game to survive to the point where multiple factions are brought into play? I don't necessarily think that you can expect that. I think that people are going to get bored. They're going to get bored really fast, and are they going to come back when you add a new faction? Who knows? I think that that is a recipe for a dwindling player base, and it just boggles my mind that they would do that. You know, right now, the game for $15 is actually hard to recommend, despite it being completely solid. And that's a good way to describe it. It's a solid game. It's a groundwork. It's a foundation for a potentially great RTS. But right now, it's not a great RTS. It is a average and fairly bland RTS outside of its aesthetic and soundtrack. That can be fixed. That's solvable. That is not a problem which is gonna kill the game, I hope, but it could. It's got the potential. It's almost like the game, in some ways, is being sent out to die. And I can't imagine why you would do that other than to get a short-term cash injection to help support the development of the game. And isn't that what early access is designed for? I think when you put a game in early access like this, people expect that there will be limitations. I don't think they expect a full-release game to be as limited as this one is. The basic mechanics are there. You can run through buildings. You can run people over, just like in Command & Conquer. You use the roads, your stuff moves faster. Mining works the way you'd expect. It's got crates in it. It's got your basic hard and soft counters. It's got the building acceleration system, where if you have multiple production buildings, you will be able to build everything faster. All of these things, the things that were in Command & Conquer, they are here. They are present. That is a good thing. And then I ask, where the hell's the rest? Where is it? And that actually is, to me, a little bit upsetting. And the reason it's upsetting is because I think, actually, this is potentially a really good real-time strategy. Because they have designed something that controls and feels almost exactly like Command & Conquer. It invokes the memory immediately of a classic. But I'm like, where's my mammoth tank? Where are my attack dogs? Where's my attack bears? From Red Alert 2, where's my Tesla Trooper? Where is my Hand of Nod? Where are my cool super weapons? Yeah, okay, the game's got a nuke. Fine, game's got a nuke. That's neat. But it's just a nuke, you know? It's not an ion cannon. It's not one of those awesome super weapons from Generals, for instance. And that had some really cool stuff in it. Scudstorm, man. Scudstorm. Oh, that was so good. Where are all of those things? They're not here. You know, when this magical faction comes in, especially since they say, look, we're trying to build a real-time strategy that's a little bit more lighthearted. So we can't have wizards versus tanks. I'm like, cool, but where is it? Don't tell me that now, show me. Give it to me immediately. Why release it so early? Why not wait? Why not give it another shot? Why not give it the opportunity to get a great start in life? You know, why drop it on its head at birth? Is that a little bit of an unpleasant metaphor? Maybe. Don't send it out to die. No, get us the other content and get us it fast, because if you don't, I could see the player base, especially in multiplayer, dwindling very rapidly. Because I don't really want to play a game that only has one faction in it unless that faction has a huge unit selection. Planetary Annihilation, to some degree, got away with it. Total Annihilation had two fairly similar factions, but honestly, you know, some of the Command & Conquer games did as well. And Red Alert 1, I would say, had relatively similar factions. They diversified them quite a lot later on. But, honestly, it's hard to recommend it right now. And that's a shame, because I think that it's got a lot of potential. But that's what it has, potential. Huh? Doesn't have that kinetic energy as of yet. It just has potential. You shouldn't be expected to buy potential, especially when it's not an early access game. I don't want potential, I want a fully fleshed out experience. And I know $15 isn't asking a lot, but compared to other games on the market, right now, on Steam, some people are going to say an RTS with one faction for $15 is not worth it. So, in my honest opinion right now, unless you are absolutely desperate to get an old school RTS, in which case, well, why don't you just play the older Command & Conquer games? Unless, of course, you object to the frame rate. And I don't necessarily blame you. You know, it's nice that this game runs really well. It feels super smooth, by the way. And it'll run on a potato. You know, it will run on integrated graphics, anything like that. So if you have a low-end machine or a netbook or even something, you know, a weaker PC Windows tablet, then you might want to have a look at that. But honestly, not in my eyes until they have added a new faction and fleshed this game out. I don't really care so much about the story. The lack of it is a little disappointing considering Command & Conquer's lineage, but I don't really care too much about that. It does help add to the personality, but you can flesh out personality without a story. You've just got to have interesting units. Not a single one. You know, these are as generic as they get. So, let me see this new faction, and when that happens, then maybe I can turn around and say to you, look, okay, this game is now worthy of your attention, you know, it's worth a good look. Right now, I don't think it is, and I don't like saying that, but it's Petroglyph's decision to release it in this early state. I can't imagine why, outside of pure financial reasons, that they would do that. I really hope it doesn't kill it. Because hopefully, you know, in a year down the line, we're going to have 6 factions. We're going to have a really lighthearted, cool, classic RTS with a vibrant community. Maybe an awesome modding scene. But that's not what we have right now. What we have is a foundation, a framework for something that could be good later. 8-Bit Armies, ladies and gentlemen, it's available for $15 or your regional equivalent on Steam. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then by all means do feel free to click the like button. If not, dislike button is right over there. And I'll see you next time.